It's good to see everyone. If you want to save your spot there, we're going to be looking at Ecclesiastes this morning and spending just a little bit of time. You probably know a lot of people are drawn to this book, and it's kind of odd because it's not your typical book that you'd find in the Bible. It's kind of tricky because it comes across as very pessimistic when you're reading through things. Just that passage we just read, which we'll get back to in a second. When you first look at it, it comes across as kind of something that's mainly filled with sadness, but there's more to it. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. Look at a couple things. We don't have time for much, but just a few things maybe for us to consider. Ecclesiastes, I don't know if you know, means preacher. So it literally means we're reading a book called The Preacher, and he's going to deliver some information. It was probably written by Solomon, and it's all about a big experiment. I guess that's the best way to put it. And to be honest, it's an experiment that sounds pretty fun. If we were to do what is about to be presented in Ecclesiastes, it would be basically this. Take a bunch of money. Money's no object, as much as you need. Buy everything that you want and do everything that you want, and then see what happens. And I know that in your mind it's probably, well, that doesn't sound very pessimistic to me. It sounds like a good deal. One of the reasons it's probably Solomon that we're reading about here is he's one of the few who could fund this experiment. Whether or not it was written by him, I do know it was inspired by God, and it's recorded here not only to tell us what happened, but how this experiment turned out. It's also written to tell us something about us, about life, and how it means nothing without God. So I'll kind of give you a heads up in that regard. You might think of it this way. Solomon was the writer, but God is the author. And I want you to know this too. If you have not read this book, it's not easy to take. It's kind of a cold glass of water in the face. It's a rude awakening. I don't like to be woken up at all, let alone rudely. But this is kind of what this book does for us. It strips away all the fluff of the world and explains the truth of life here on this world. And it helps you so you can see the world as it really is. And for the most part, what you're going to see is disturbing. It's things that we don't want to talk about. But it's good for us to have a clear picture of the world. Otherwise, if we don't do this once in a while, we kind of tend to get used to this. And we think, well, this place isn't so bad. And everything's fine. And we kind of settle in and kind of break even. We have the things that we like to do and the things that we try to avoid. And we get wrapped up in things that don't matter. And we get wrapped up in things that don't last. So Ecclesiastes, I would like to suggest, is kind of a wake-up call. But it has a lot of things we don't necessarily want to hear. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like being at a really nice birthday party, and everyone's laughing and having a good time. And there's this guy who keeps bringing up stuff that you don't want to talk about. How about those taxes? Tax season, and he's bringing that up at the party. Or you know what? Just think about we're all going to have to get up early for work tomorrow. Or how about North Korea? Isn't that something? We're probably going to be nuked before we can sing happy birthday. It's that guy. Don't talk about that. We just want to sing and have some cake. But everything in Ecclesiastes is all true. But it's things people don't want to think about. But one thing I think you'll find, if you face Ecclesiastes head on and face the difficult lessons it has to teach, that we'll just talk about a few of those this morning, it can be really encouraging. It can actually end up being very optimistic for you. But as was just read, Chance read this for us, chapter 1, verse 2, it says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity." And notice the repetition there. He's saying everything is meaningless. That's how it starts off. Basically saying everything is a waste of time. You're not going to see that verse on a greeting card. All your efforts, your job, your house, all your plans, you add it all up and it's zero. That's what he starts off with. And that's basically the theme of the whole book. Everything is meaningless. If you go to verse 14, same chapter 1, verse 14, I bet you've heard this. It says, "I have seen all the works which have been done under the sun." He says, "I've seen it all. And behold, all is vanity and striving after wind. Some versions say chasing after the wind. It's pursuing something you'll never catch. Verse 8. Go back up a little ways to chapter 1, verse 8. All things are wearisome. Man is not able to tell it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor is the ear filled with hearing. That which has been is that which will be. And that which has been done is that which will be done. So there's nothing new under the sun. He's saying everything just kind of wears you out. The eyes and the ears, they're never satisfied. There's nothing new. So Solomon, what he did is he bought a lot of great stuff, but no matter how great it was, eventually the newness wore off. You know how that works. Something's new and you like that, has a brand new smell. But eventually it all gets boring. That's what he's basically saying. In fact, he goes on to say that technically there's really not anything new. It's just the same old stuff. It's just packaged differently. With the Ecclesiastes help, it finally hits you that we're surrounded by a bunch of nothing. And that's not what you want to hear, but it's true. Verse 11, this is still in chapter 1, verse 11, and this is where it kind of gets pretty pointed. There's no remembrance of earlier things, and also of the later things which will occur, there will be for them no remembrance among those who will come later still. I don't know if you ever thought about this. It's kind of a dark thought. Someday, people will be talking, and your name's going to come up, and somebody's going to say, who? It's kind of odd to think about that. So there's somebody alive right now who will be the last person to remember who you are. And after they're gone, there will be no one left to say who you were. Eventually, you'll be forgotten. Everyone is eventually forgotten. No matter how much you accomplish, eventually your name comes up, and it will be followed by one word, and it will be who? Let's look at Nehemiah 10. We're going to take a side trip here to Nehemiah chapter 10. I'm going to point out a name to you. I found this name. Nehemiah chapter 10, verse 15. Somebody mentioned here the very first name. Kind of a funny name. Bunny. There was a guy named Bunny. Maybe it was Booney or something, but sounded a little bit better. You know who he was? Neither do I. I have no idea. As far as I know, it's the only time he's ever mentioned in the Bible. And you'll notice there's other names around his name. I don't know who they were either. They're just kind of listed here. They're in the Bible, but I don't know anything about them. They were here, and now they're gone. But when he was alive, his life was his whole world. He had plans, he had dreams, maybe accomplished something, maybe tried to talk his parents into changing his name, but either way, he had plans. He was probably talented. He had friends, certain interests, and now nobody knows who this guy was. In fact, it took a little effort right now on our part to even know that he existed. He has been forgotten, and eventually this happens to everyone. And let's say there's some kind of historical record and your name is listed. That might make things last for a while. There's actually a picture of my great-grandfather. I can't remember his name. I was getting ready to present this, and I was putting down my notes to say, it's so appropriate. I don't even know his name, my great-grandfather's name. If he hadn't lived, I wouldn't be here. But essentially, he's forgotten. He's a picture on a wall. And even if there's pictures and words about you, you're not going to be really remembered for who you were. There might be little snippets and say, I think they liked brownies, I think. And some things will stick out that we'll kind of remember. And that's kind of frightening, and I want this to be as real as possible. Everything you're going to do tomorrow, and everything you're going to do for the rest of your life, everything about you will be forgotten. So if Ecclesiastes was a friend at your birthday party, you'd probably say, why don't you go hang out in the backyard for a while? We kind of want to open some presents, and you're kind of a downer. But he's not finished. There's more. Chapter 1, 18. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 1, 18. Because in much wisdom there is much grief, and increasing knowledge results in increasing pain. In other words, wisdom can make you sad. Knowledge hurts. And this is exactly what Ecclesiastes is doing, is giving us wisdom that kind of makes us sad. Say, I don't want to be forgotten. Giving us knowledge that hurts. I don't want to know that everything is a waste of time. We all know that the more you know, the sadder you can get. We grow up and can become disillusioned, disappointed when we find out that certain things we admire are not admirable. It's easy to become cynical. So no wonder many people are not all that eager to get wisdom and knowledge. I think that's probably why some people dodge church and say, I don't want to know about stuff, because then it kind of makes you have to face things. No wonder people are not that eager. We even talk about how ignorance is bliss. In other words, ignorance is painless. Chapter 2, verse 2. I don't know if you ever read this part of Ecclesiastes. This one always jumps out at me. Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 2. I said of laughter, it is madness. And of pleasure, what does it accomplish? Saying laughter is foolish and pleasure doesn't accomplish anything. To oversimplify, and this is kind of what he's saying, sorrow and grief are good, laughter and fun are bad. It can kind of come across that way and say, I'm not sure I like this message. But laughter is one of our favorite pastimes. We have this machine called a television, and we watch it to laugh. And we like movies that make us laugh. We tell jokes to laugh. And there's sitcoms. I don't know if you know, there's canned laughter. That's pre-recorded laughter to tell you when to laugh. I even read an article years ago, some of you know about Johnny Carson. There are professional laughers that were planted in the audience to help the audience know when to laugh. Their job was to sit in the audience and laugh at the jokes. I thought that was an interesting job. I'm a big fan of laughter. In fact, God gives us a sense of humor. I really believe that. You can find humor in the Bible. There's some pretty humorous verses. And laughter is good for you. You probably know Proverbs 17:22. A joyful heart is good medicine, no doubt. God is not anti-laughter. That's not what I'm saying. But constant, empty, mindless laughter, not so good. If it's always about the next joke and you can't ever really stop to think about life, compared to that, sorrow can be better. Chapter 7, verse 3 even says, sorrow is better than laughter. I prefer laughter. Laughing at yourself is a good thing. I would really encourage you to develop that. And laughing can heal a bad situation. I think sometimes you've probably been in circumstances where you think, you know what, it's so bad, let's just laugh. And there's a lot of blessings that can come from laughter. But notice, I don't know if you've noticed in your life, if you look back, when you laugh, it's great and it's done and it's over. But there's a lot of times I look back on my life where there was crying and sorrow, and it's a marking of a turning point. A lot of times when there's sorrow, it's not fun, but when it's over, something's different. And that can be a good thing. It's not easy. It's not a fun thing, but it can be a good thing. And this clearly seems to indicate that. And that's hard to accept, but Ecclesiastes is here to help us with some truth and not pulling any punches. Remember I said this was kind of an experiment that he was doing. I'm going to read a little bit of this. It's chapter 2, verse 4. Here's some of the things that he did. Now remember, money was no object. It'd be like somebody just bankrolling you to do whatever you wanted. And here's what he did. This is chapter 2, verse 4. I enlarged my works. I built houses for myself. I planted vineyards for myself. I made gardens and parks for myself. And I planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made ponds of water for myself from which to irrigate a forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves, and I had homeborn slaves. Also, I possessed flocks and herds larger than all who had preceded me in Jerusalem. Also, I collected for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I provided for myself male and female singers and the pleasures of men, many concubines, and I became great and increased more than all who preceded me in Jerusalem. My wisdom also stood by me. All that my eyes desired, I did not refuse them. He saw it, he got it. I did not withhold my heart from any pleasure, for my heart was pleased because of all my labor, and this was my reward for all my labor. He built a bunch of houses, parks, and orchards, majorly expensive collections. He had live music. Anything he wanted, he got it. He pretty much did If you think about it, he pretty much did what everybody thinks is the recipe for happiness. It's kind of like we're all on this path. So yeah, I'm going this way. This is going to be great. And we really head down that path thinking this is where it's at. He went on ahead. He ran on up ahead and pursued all the things that we're pursuing and followed it to its conclusion. It's almost like he had a walkie-talkie. He went up on ahead. So how's it up there? And we get his report. He went on ahead to see where it goes. And this was his report. This is what he comes back on the walkie to say. Yeah, I've gone up ahead. Chapter 2, verse 11. Thus I considered all my activities which my hands had done, and the labor which I had exerted. And behold, all was vanity and striving after wind, and there was no profit under the sun. He says, you know what? I've gone up ahead. Not much up here. I'm not really thinking this is the right path. I did all this stuff, and when it was all done, it was all a waste of time, and it didn't make me happy. Didn't get anything out of it. So as we head towards a conclusion here, I'm going to review a little bit. He's saying everything in life is meaningless. You will be forgotten. It's better to cry than to laugh. And even if you dream big, it's all going to turn out to be empty. And these are just a few of the things that he said. I would recommend that you read it for yourself and get a real eye-opener. He's the guy, in a sense, he's ruined the party, and he's got more. Here's Ecclesiastes 6. As if that wasn't grim enough. Verse 12, Ecclesiastes 6:12. For who knows what is good for a man during his lifetime, during the few years of his futile life? He will spend them like a shadow. For who can tell a man what will be after him under the sun? Okay, let's sing happy birthday now. That's really a downer. After everything else, he adds this, we're like shadows. We're just shadows. Life is short. And you might think, if you stopped here, you might think, well, I can tell where this is going. He's going to wrap it up with, so everybody find a hole, crawl in, and just squeak by. Just eke out some kind of existence. But you'll know, and for the sake of time, I'll just mention some things. If you go to Ecclesiastes 9 and read on, he says, no, go ahead and live life. Don't give up. There's nothing wrong with living life. Do your best. Put your effort in. Enjoy yourself. But keep in mind all these other things that we've been talking about. Things of the earth come to an end. It's kind of like going up to the guy at the party, and he's making some good points. You say, have some punch, but you don't kick him out. And he's probably going to even sing happy birthday with you. But it's important to remember, he's saying, you know, guys, the party doesn't last forever. It doesn't go on forever. I think he turns out to be that friend who's pretty straightforward with you. And I hope all of you have at least one person who's this kind of friend. He's straightforward with you to the point of sometimes being annoying. But then you realize and you begin to see he's one of your best friends because of that very fact. It's easy to take Ecclesiastes the wrong way, and it's not written to make us depressed. It's written to open our eyes. In fact, the end is a very positive note. Ecclesiastes 12:1, the last chapter, begins this way. There's so much more going on here, and I really would recommend that you read it, but Ecclesiastes 12:1 says, remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. In other words, as soon as possible, keep God firmly in mind. We have a tendency to forget Him. Isn't that interesting that we have to be told to remember God? And it's necessary. We get caught up in the things of the world. We forget God. We forget that the world only has empty stuff, and we forget that this is coming to an end. This is a very temporary arrangement. Chances are that by tomorrow you'll forget everything that's being said right now. That's what the odds are. It takes effort to get up tomorrow and think, oh yeah, there's more than just this life. This is not all there is. In Ecclesiastes, God reminds us we live in a world of emptiness, and the best decision is to cling to Him as soon as possible. A lot of Ecclesiastes is pretty tough to take, and there's a great description in verse 11, chapter 12:11. It's kind of painful. This is a good description of it. Ecclesiastes 12:11, the words of wise men are like goads. It's a pointed stick. And masters of these collections are like well-driven nails. They are given by one shepherd. A goad was a sharp stick to point an animal in the right direction. It was jabs. So it's out. It a comfortable guidance. These things that we're looking at are not necessarily comfortable. They're more like goads jabbing us in the right direction. We tend to kind of settle down. We kind of drift off, and we build our lives out of fragile things. And these difficult thoughts are to help us stay sharp. And that's hopefully one of the reasons that we came here this morning, is to stay sharp. Here's the very last thing. After everything's presented here, go to chapter 12, verse 13. He ends with a very solid conclusion. Ecclesiastes 12:13. The conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. It's kind of nice to have it all simplified. It says, yes, all this is true. A lot of it is overwhelming, pretty dark, but it really comes down to two things. Fear God, revere him, treat him as God, as your king, and keep his commandments. Do what he says. If those are in place, you will have a better grip on life. You will not be living an empty life. I don't know if you notice, but once in a while, it feels like I'm not getting much out of this life. Things are not turning out like I hoped. There's something missing, and we know what it is. John 10:10. Jesus says, I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I don't want just life. I want to have it abundantly. I want the good version of my life. I often make decisions that makes it drift off into the lesser version. Jesus did what he did so that your life will have value, so that it won't be empty, so that at the end of each day and at the end of your life, you can look back and say, my life mattered. Turns out Ecclesiastes is like the friend who is very straightforward with you, a good friend. A lot of this is not fun to hear, but I want to give you some good news and then end it with this. The world, I can't change this. The world is going to forget you. It's going to forget us. There will be a time when nobody will know that what we're doing right now even occurred or that any of us existed. But one thing you can do, even though the world forgets you, is remember your Creator. Don't forget him. Tomorrow you'll probably forget, but then get back to remembering again. Because even though the world will forget you, God won't. He will not forget you. He not only knows you really well, he will never forget you. He will remember you, and that's really the only thing that matters, the only thing that gives meaning to our lives. There was one time Jesus said essentially what Ecclesiastes said. It's in John 15, verse 5, and we'll close with this. And it's just as straightforward, just as extreme. John 15, verse 5. I am the vine, and you are the branches. He who abides in me, and I in him, he bears much fruit. For apart from me, you can do nothing. Without Jesus, life will be nothing. So get ready for it. If we're just playing around, if we're not serious about this, that's what waits farther down the path. Solomon has seen it, and it's not happy. But with Jesus, it will be everything. There's a better version of you, a better version of your life waiting, and God is eager to bless you with that. And we want to encourage everybody here to be with him. He's the one person, Jesus is the one person who got out of here alive, and through baptism, you can be part of that. And of course, the opportunity is always available. We'll be singing a song, and you're welcome to come forward and make that happen and make sure that you're right with God. He will let you be a part of the same survival plan. One day, even if the world forgets you, it's God who remembers you, and he will call you by name, and everything will turn out really well. When it comes down to it, that's really the one and only thing that really does matter. Let's think about this while we stand together and sing.